Picture this. You're standing in front of a crowd, your heart racing like a drum, palms sweating, throat tightening. Your mind goes blank. Every eye in the room feels like a spotlight burning into your soul. This isn't just nervousness, this is glossophobia, the fear of public speaking, and it affects up to 75% of the population. You're not alone in this terror, and you're certainly not weak for feeling it. But here's what most people don't realize. The psychology behind this fear reveals something profound about human nature, social evolution, and the intricate workings of your brain. Today, we're diving deep into 4 fascinating psychological facts about people who dread public speaking. Facts that might completely change how you understand yourself and others. What we discover might surprise you, challenge you, and perhaps even liberate you. The fear of public speaking isn't just about stage fright or shyness. It's a complex psychological phenomenon rooted in our evolutionary biology, social conditioning, and cognitive architecture. When someone tells you to just relax before a presentation, they're missing the entire point. Your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do, protect you from perceived social threats that thousands of years ago could have meant exile from your tribe and certain death. In this philosophical exploration, we'll uncover 4 psychological truths that researchers have discovered about public speaking anxiety. We'll examine the spotlight effect, the connection between perfectionism and fear, the surprising link to high empathy, and the neurological battle happening inside your brain. Each fact reveals something deeper about the human condition and our relationship with vulnerability, judgment, and authentic expression. Before we begin this journey together, I want to invite you into this conversation. Hit that like button if you've ever felt this fear, drop a comment sharing your experience with public speaking, and subscribe so we can continue exploring the mysteries of human psychology together. Now let's dive in. The first fascinating psychological fact about people who fear public speaking is that they dramatically overestimate how much others notice their mistakes. This phenomenon is called the spotlight effect, and it's a cognitive bias that makes us believe we're the center of everyone's attention far more than we actually are. Psychologists Thomas Gilovich and Kenneth Savitsky conducted groundbreaking research on this effect at Cornell University. They discovered that people believe their mistakes, awkwardness, and nervous behaviors are noticed by others approximately twice as much as they actually are. When you stumble over a word or forget your point, you think everyone is judging you harshly. In reality, most people are too preoccupied with their own concerns to scrutinize your every move. This relates directly to public speaking anxiety, because those who fear it tend to have an inflated sense of audience awareness. They imagine every person in the crowd analyzing their trembling hands, noticing every and cataloging every imperfection. The psychological weight of this imagined scrutiny becomes crushing. But here's the liberating truth. Your audience is far more forgiving and far less attentive to your flaws than you believe. Why does this happen? Evolutionarily, humans are deeply social creatures who needed to maintain their status within the group to survive. Being rejected or ridiculed could mean death in ancestral environments. So our brains developed a hypersensitivity to social evaluation, a smoke detector that goes off even when there's no fire. This explains why public speaking feels like a survival threat, even though rationally we know it isn't. The spotlight effect also reveals something profound about self-consciousness. People who dislike public speaking often have a heightened self-awareness, which isn't necessarily negative. This trait correlates with thoughtfulness, introspection, and consideration for others. However, when turned inward during a presentation, this self-awareness becomes a prison where you're simultaneously the performer and the harshest critic. Understanding the spotlight effect doesn't eliminate the fear, but it offers perspective. When you recognize that your internal experience is magnified compared to external reality, you can begin to separate perceived judgment from actual judgment. The audience isn't a panel of executioners. They're mostly hoping you succeed, partly because your success makes them feel less uncomfortable. This first fact teaches us something philosophical. We are simultaneously less important and more accepted than we imagine. The paradox of the spotlight effect is that by recognizing we're not always center stage, we can actually perform better when we are. The second psychological truth is that people who fear public speaking often struggle with perfectionism, and this perfectionism masks a deeper fear of being fully seen and potentially rejected for who they truly are. This goes beyond simply wanting to do well. It's about protecting a carefully constructed identity from collapse. Research in personality psychology has consistently shown a strong correlation between perfectionism and public speaking anxiety. Perfectionists set impossibly high standards for themselves, and when performance situations arise, like public speaking, the gap between their ideal self and their feared self becomes terrifyingly visible. Every presentation becomes a referendum on their worth as a human being, rather than simply sharing information or ideas. But here's what's fascinating. Perfectionism in public speaking isn't really about the speech itself, it's about control. When you're conversing with a friend, you make mistakes constantly. You misspeak, you ramble, you forget words. But in those moments, you feel safe because the social stakes feel lower and the interaction feels mutual. Public speaking removes that sense of control. You can't gauge everyone's reactions simultaneously. You can't take back words once spoken, and you can't hide behind the comfortable dynamics of one-on-one conversation. Brené Brown's research on vulnerability illuminates this perfectly. She found that people who struggle most with vulnerability, showing themselves authentically, including their imperfections, experience the highest levels of anxiety in situations where they feel exposed. Public speaking is perhaps the ultimate vulnerability exercise. You stand alone, all eyes on you, offering your thoughts and ideas for potential judgment or rejection. The perfectionist's fear of public speaking often stems from childhood experiences, where performance was tied to love and acceptance. If you learned early that mistakes meant disappointment from caregivers, or that achievement was the primary way to earn approval, your brain wired itself to see any public failure as catastrophic. Public speaking becomes dangerous because it threatens the strategy you've used your entire life to stay safe and valued. Philosophically, this reveals something tragic about the human condition. Our desperate attempt to appear perfect actually prevents genuine connection. Audiences don't connect with perfection. They connect with authenticity, with vulnerability, with the occasional stumble that makes you human. The perfectionist's fear is that being fully seen means being fully rejected, but the ironic truth is that hiding behind perfection is what actually prevents real acceptance. This second fact challenges us to reconsider what safety really means. Is it safer to build walls of perfection that keep others at a distance, or to risk being seen with all our imperfections and discover we're accepted anyway? The third surprising psychological fact is that people who fear public speaking often possess higher levels of empathy than average, and this empathy becomes a double-edged sword in performance situations. This challenges the common assumption that public speaking anxiety is about self-absorption. In many cases, it's actually about being hyper-aware of others. Empathy is the capacity to sense and feel what others are experiencing emotionally. Recent psychological research suggests that highly empathic individuals experience greater anxiety in public speaking contexts because they're simultaneously trying to deliver their message while emotionally absorbing the audience's reactions, real or imagined. It's like trying to sing while listening to multiple conflicting songs at once. When a highly empathic person stands before an audience, they don't just see faces, they sense moods, detect micro-expressions of boredom or confusion, and feel the energy in the room viscerally. If someone in the third row looks disengaged, the empathic speaker doesn't just notice it. They feel it as a personal failure, as evidence they're not connecting. This emotional absorption becomes overwhelming, making it nearly impossible to stay focused on the content they're trying to deliver. This explains why many people who fear public speaking are actually excellent one-on-one communicators. In individual conversations, their empathy is an asset. They read emotional cues beautifully, adjust their communication style responsively, and create deep connections. But scale that to 30 or 300 people, and the empathic input becomes paralyzing. They're trying to emotionally attune to too many people simultaneously, and their nervous system overloads. There's also a fascinating connection to rejection sensitivity here. Empathic individuals often developed their sensitivity as a survival strategy, learning early to read the emotional climate to stay safe. If you grew up in an environment where you needed to constantly monitor others' moods to predict safety or danger, you became exceptionally skilled at emotional detection. But that same skill that protected you in childhood becomes a burden in public speaking, where you're hypervigilant to any sign of disapproval. Neuroscientifically, this makes sense. Brain imaging studies show that highly empathic people have more active mirror neuron systems, the networks that allow us to internally simulate others' experiences. During public speaking, when these systems are flooded with inputs from multiple people, the cognitive and emotional load becomes immense. You're not just managing your own anxiety, you're unconsciously processing dozens of other emotional states. The philosophical dimension here is profound. The same quality that makes someone deeply human, the capacity to feel with others, can also be the source of their suffering in certain contexts. Empathy isn't just a gift, it's a responsibility that requires boundaries. The fourth and perhaps most fundamental psychological fact is that people who fear public speaking are experiencing a neurological reality called an amygdala hijack, where the brain's ancient threat detection system overrides rational thought. This isn't weakness or irrationality. It's your brain doing exactly what evolution designed it to do, just in the wrong context. The amygdala is an almond-shaped structure deep in your brain that serves as your personal alarm system. It's constantly scanning your environment for threats, and when it detects danger, it triggers the fight or flight response before your conscious mind even knows what's happening. For public speaking, the amygdala perceives the situation as a threat, not a physical threat like a predator, but a social threat that activates the same survival circuitry. Here's what happens neurologically. When you approach the stage or start speaking, your amygdala detects the social exposure and floods your system with stress hormones, cortisol, and adrenaline. Your heart rate increases, blood flows away from your brain toward your muscles in case you need to run. Your digestion stops and your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for rational thought and memory, goes partially offline. This is why people forget their carefully prepared speeches or can't think clearly when anxious. Psychologist Daniel Goleman popularized the term amygdala hijack to describe moments when emotional reactivity overwhelms rational control. During public speaking, this hijack explains the physical symptoms people experience: trembling hands, shaky voice, shortness of breath, mind going blank. These aren't signs of personal failure. They're evidence of an ancient system trying to protect you from what it perceives as mortal danger. What makes this particularly challenging is that the amygdala learns from experience, but it's not very discriminating. If you had a negative public speaking experience in the past, maybe you were laughed at in school or harshly criticized during a presentation, your amygdala filed that memory as public speaking equals danger. Now, every time you face a similar situation, it pulls that alarm, trying to protect you from repeating that painful experience. The evolutionary context is crucial here. For our ancestors, social rejection from the tribe could mean death. Being judged negatively, mocked, or ostracized had real survival consequences. So natural selection favored individuals whose brains took social threats seriously. Your fear of public speaking is, in this sense, an evolutionary success story. Your ancestors survived precisely because they cared deeply about social evaluation. Modern neuroscience offers hope, though. The brain's plasticity means we can retrain the amygdala through repeated safe exposure. Each time you speak publicly and survive, you provide counter-evidence to your amygdala's threat narrative. Slowly, the alarm becomes less sensitive. This is the neurological basis for the common advice to practice more, though knowing the why behind it makes the process more compassionate toward yourself. So what do these 4 psychological facts teach us about the human experience? They reveal that the fear of public speaking isn't a character flaw or personal weakness. It's a complex interaction between evolutionary biology, social conditioning, personality traits, and neurological architecture. The spotlight effect shows us we're simultaneously less scrutinized and more accepted than we imagine. Perfectionism reveals our deep need to be seen and valued authentically. High empathy demonstrates that sensitivity is both gift and burden. And the amygdala hijack reminds us that our brains are still running ancient software in modern contexts. If you struggle with public speaking, know this: your fear is not irrational. It's deeply human, rooted in legitimate psychological and biological realities. The path forward isn't to eliminate the fear entirely, but to understand it, to work with it compassionately, and to recognize that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's speaking despite the fear, acknowledging the vulnerability, and choosing authentic expression over perfect performance. Thank you for joining me in this exploration. If these insights resonated with you, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling me which of these 4 facts surprised you most. And remember, your voice matters, your perspective is valuable, and the world needs what you have to say, imperfectly spoken and all. Until next time, keep questioning, keep growing, and keep being beautifully human.